had a few questions, and it's the springtime, and spring means there's a lot of wild greens out there. A lot of people are asking me about recipes and things, and not really sure how to actually work with some of the wild plants they know, so we'll be covering some of that today. We got Triphala on the menu, talking about Triphala. We got beard care from Alex. We got ideas about Japanese knotweed and Comfrey horsetail and eating onions and Ayurveda. So maybe that's kind of... Oh, and herbal wines. So this is the breakdown of things we'll talk about tonight. And I'm also checking the Facebook invite. If anybody has questions or things they'd like elaborated on, you're welcome. So here we go. So Alex asks, basically, do I use any products in my hair or beard? As you see, I've got a lot of dreadlocks. Actually, I use no products. It just takes a lot of time. A lot of people believe in doing dreads. That's kind of not really what I'm interested in. I just allow my hair to be natural because for me, it's a waste of time to mow the lawn on every level, including my own body. So I'm really low maintenance, but I do get an itchy beard sometimes, and I actually have, since I had Lyme, took antibiotics, herbs, I got an allergic reaction to andrographis. Ever since then, I actually started developing psoriasis, which was really interesting. And so my body is a little more reactive, and I realized I narrowed it down basically to gluten. So it reacts with gluten, sugar. I had preservatives. Those were no good, like silicate, whatever, something like that. And cashews. So those are things that really set me off. So I get actual psoriasis in my beard. That's my fun game that I'm working with and learning how to tonify my intestines, because skin is your external version of your own intestinal tract. So everything that is shown on the skin is essentially what your intestines look like and feel like. So for me, I'm treating that as a need for moisture, and we can get more into Ayurvedic constitutions in a bit. But so it's important that I use something in my beard to just help me tonify myself. So I make a mix of almond oil, aloe vera, rose water, and essential oils. Basically whatever I had last time. I used frankincense. It was awesome. So I kind of put it like this and go all up in there, and then I brush my beard, and that's very important every day. It's funny, I don't brush that, do brush the beard. Not a big fan of beard dreads, that's just my thing. But couldn't ever see myself with beard dreads. So that's a little bit about beard maintenance for all you ladies out there who are interested in growing a beard. That's your first steps. Also young men who want to throw away razors, there's your opportunity. I haven't really cut any of my hair in probably over 10 years. Really into it. It's definitely sensitizes my perception. It's definitely a little harder to deal with. It's definitely a strain on my neck. So this is like antennas to the whole world, and needs to be cleaned. So that means also energetically cleaned. Burning sage, cleaning all that psychic stuff off of us is very important no matter what we're doing. Very important practice. So, thoughts on Triphala. Triphala is an Ayurvedic herb which is really getting popular. It's known as kind of the mother of formulas in Ayurveda, and they say if you don't have a mother, drink Triphala. Triphala is basically tree is three in the Sanskrit tradition, and phala is fruit. So that means the three fruits, and that's Haritaki, Bibitaki, and Amalaki are the actual names, and those are mixed in different proportions, sometimes mixed by different doshas, which are constitutions. So in Ayurveda there is Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, and those are conditional situations. So we can look at a person as a constitution. Are they dry, which is Vata, air, right? Are they moist, always oily, hot, sweating all the time? That's fire or Pitta. And then Kapha is kind of mucusy, holding weight, really loves ice cream, all those kind of things. So we have a constitutional model out of Ayurveda, which I've been trained in and still always training. And it's a way to look at the body, or to look at systems in a constitutional way, instead of this organ, that organ, Skin does this, hair does this, all these kind of things. Just look at the total picture of the trend through elemental awareness. So in this case, it's water, fire, and air. However, many people will say, oh, I'm Kapha, or they'll say, I'm Pitta, or they'll say one or the other. As I was taught by Vasant Lad and many others in the tradition, they talk about a 3-2-1 ratio. So there's actually a dominant dosha, and then there's a sub-dosha. So I'm Kapha 3, Pitta 2, Vata 1. So that means I have Kapha and Pitta tendencies, so water and heat, right? So that's an oracle into the system of understanding your trends of disease over a long period of time. So with that, Triphala is 5 flavors. So we talk a lot at herbal classes about the 6 tastes. So I apologize. 6 flavors, right? Triphala has 6 flavors. So we talk about the 6 tastes: sour, sweet, salty, bitter, pungent, astringent, and sour, salty. Oh, see, I forgot salty, America's favorite. So we have those constitutions, and those tastes actually represent different organ transformation through the body. Sour and bitter balance out, for example, sweet. So I'm eating a lot of sweet, which also is carbohydrates, kapha-like food, things that turn into sugar in the bloodstream, cause retention of water, retention of weight. The antidotes of those essentially are sour, bitter. Those things are cleansing, detoxifying, help us to reduce what we hold. So the idea in Ayurveda is to balance the doshas, and so they talk about an anti-doshic diet. So if you know your constitution, then you eat actually according to the opposite, because your tendency with pitta or fire will be to eat hot, spicy food, to be aggravated, to be sweaty, to be balding, to be always like high-strung, to drink a lot of coffee. Those are the things that are actually going to drive pitta into an overdrive, which causes a disease. So the same is true for kapha. If they're drinking dairy, milk, eating ice cream at 11 o'clock at night, they're just going to wake up full of mucus. They're going to have sinus problems, bronchial issues, digestive issues, right? All this goop will just clog the system. Toxicity, right? Low blood pressure, all these different versions of clogging in the system. So then if a kapha person, for example, eats a more pitta diet, we all know when we eat chili peppers, right, all the mucus comes out in our sinuses, which is the cleansing process. It's not that the mucus is the problem. Mucus transfers out bacteria and viruses of the body. These are natural processes that the evolutionary body has designed over millions of years, and we should probably honor them as important. So Triphala has all of those 6 tastes. And actually, who was it? Jeremiah. It was Jeremiah, yeah. Jeremiah Wallach up in Massachusetts. He lives in a beautiful bus. My dream come true. So he was mentioning actually Triphala can help you diagnose what flavors you need to eat, because if you take Triphala, the idea is that you will taste what you need in that spectrum. So if you taste bitter, that's actually perhaps, I forget how it goes, maybe that means you need to increase other flavors. I'm not sure, but there's an article I can post about that. So Triphala is these 3 fruits, and basically they're designed to be a digestive tonic, and they help with regulating the intestinal flow. So they're basically used for mild constipation. Some people say it's laxative, other people say it's bowel regulating. So it's a very different factor, right? Because you don't want to be laxative. That's, again, if we're talking constitution, that might be a vata or kapha disorder, right? Or pitta. I mean, everyone can have it, but how it goes out there, that's the question. So you can take Triphala in the morning, 1 teaspoon in 16 ounces of water, and you let it sit there for a few hours, and then you drink it at maybe 8:30 or 9:30 at night before you go to sleep, even 7, 8, and the next morning it will help you just have good bowel movements. Also, amla, one of the plants in that formula, is actually the highest source of vitamin C. Not remembering if amla, haritaki, maybe you can look that up. So that's one of the highest sources of vitamin C on the planet, and we know that that's very good for us, an antioxidant. So that's a little breakdown on Triphala. I mean, K.P. Khalsa has books on Ayurveda. Michael Tier and K.P. Khalsa wrote a great book. Vasant Lad is also a great Ayurveda teacher. So these are just some resources. And Banyan Botanicals has pretty good Triphala. It's organic, so you can check that out. And you can just take it daily, and I do as much as I can think of it. And it's a beautiful, digestive, cleaning herb. Let's see what we got. Don't cry, Richie. I know this stuff is intense.
Beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
So I guess we'll just continue on with the questions here. And the next question is Japanese knotweed. Huh? There's an elephant. An elephant in the room. That means like something that you're not looking at. There's like a phrase. Have you ever heard that?
I have.
There's an elephant, a pink elephant in the room.
Yeah, you know.
So here's a.
I always say hello to it.
Yeah, you
Invite
gotta
it
say
in.
hello to the elephants. I mean, we need all the help we can get.
It's good luck.
Elephant medicine. So here's an example of probably elephant medicine. Probably elephants eat this somewhere. This is Japanese knotweed. It's an invasive quote-unquote plant, and it's in the Polygonum Polygonaceae, which is the buckwheat family, and that means they all have many joints. Polygonum means many elbows in Greek. So they all have, see, once I get a better camera set up, I can show you this really clearly, but they all have a papery sheath at the node. A node is where the leaf meets. Boing, boing. So I harvested these the other day. They're quite sour and delicious, like rhubarb. And this way you actually don't harvest the roots, but the roots are a profound medicine. Stephen Buhner made them kind of famous, talking about working with those in cases of Lyme disease, which is incredibly prevalent these days. So Japanese knotweed roots, Japanese knotweed roots are worked with really for helping herbal formulas to spread deeper into the system, such as into cartilage and fatty tissue, which is where Lyme spirochetes hide, and they harbor, and they produce a protein coating, and antibiotics go through and they can't find them. Japanese knotweed, even with antibiotics for Lyme disease, Japanese knotweed actually helps any in this case bacterial issue like Lyme disease. The Japanese knotweed can help that antibacterial herb or antibiotic. That's a huge world in itself, but it can help that actually go deeper into the cartilage, into the places where there's inflammation. So it's an anti-inflammatory. It has resveratrol. Resveratrol is really talked about in the herbal health industry now, like it's a nutraceutical of some sort. So they're extracting this plant, which grows in our backyards, putting it in bottles and shipping it to health food stores and saying, oh, it's resveratrol, it's so miraculous. And if anybody's familiar, grapes also have resveratrol, but in a lot less content than this Japanese knotweed over here. So grapes got this little promotional boost. Japanese knotweed, it didn't. And so now this grows all over the place, and you have literally people trying to get rid of this using chemicals, using bulldozers, using every possible means, because they see this as an invasive plant. And so I'm an herbalist and I'm a forager, and so I think a lot about what does invasive mean, and I cross compare that to other cultural methods, cultural practices, such as like pouring concrete, or putting down townhouses, or fracking water, or being mean and rude, and those are all invasive practices. So we have this whole spectrum of invasive practice, and we look at also, we're not Native Americans, and colonists came, and so actually a lot of the invasive plants that we know about really started to spread because we brought them here after what was called the Dust Bowl. So there's a kind of forgotten chapter in the history of America. I believe it was in the 20s. There was something called the Dust Bowl, which is that they monocropped, they grew the same corn, etc., over and over in the fields, and eventually a big dust storms came, and actually the soil was so depleted it was powder, and the dust storms blew it all over the place. place. And so there was basically a crop failure. This was, I think, before the Great Depression. So it probably helped lead to the Great Depression. I have to fact check that, but I'm sure that's actually true. And so we have this kind of point in history where, oh, monoculturing causes a great devastation and loss of soil. So what we did was we looked to Japan and China, and we looked for soil erosion plants. So those are like Japanese barberry, Japanese knotweed, bamboo, what's the other one? Autumn olives, right? Those all came from this experiment to get erosion under control, which is funny because now we're looking at them like invasive plants and we're spraying them with chemicals. So first we brought them here for stopping erosion. So it's like a compounding dummy who just keeps making a bigger mistake. I like to think of it as like a monster, like a stone monster in a glass house, just like trying to pick out a lampshade or something. You're just like, oh god. So the best option then would be maybe to just eat these and make a sustainable economy around regenerative harvest of these invasive weeds. That means we would have free food, free resveratrol, free healthcare. A lot of different options are in these little plants. So one of the ways that I work with this plant is I actually, the other night I took some water, I chopped it up, I boiled it for 3-4 minutes, I put it in a blender, and then I added maple syrup and I stirred it up, and it's like a compote, and it was sweet and sour and delicious. And that's one way of eating them. You can also treat it as like a sour asparagus and perhaps saute the whole thing. I've grilled them before. I remember that at Emily's house. We grilled them on a grill, and that was pretty nice. As long as they're flexible, you can get away with eating pretty much most of that. Obviously, like all vegetables, as soon as you pick them, the end will start to get a little more thick. That's fine if you're, woody, right, in time. That's fine if you're going to cook it. If you want to eat it raw, you just eat the tops. They're really delicious. They're easy to harvest a whole bunch of. The problem is some people want to get rid of it. I'm thinking, man, this is such an easy, free food source. Let's stop building concrete and go crazy on farming tools and just harvest some of this and work with that, see what that's about. So this is kind of a stash. Went out the other day foraging, and you can too. Japanese knotweed.
And what kind of an environment did you find those?
Japanese knotweed, that's a good question. Japanese knotweed likes to hang out on riverbeds, kind of, and take over some of that habitat right along the rivers. Now, of course, that means streams, I should say. That means if you're near a stream, you should make sure that that water is kind of clean, because don't forget there's been a few hurricanes recently, and that toxicity is in the soil. So another thing that all herbs and plants do that we must remember is that they're cleaning the ecosystem. So there's this whole idea behind invasive plants that they've actually come in and they're repairing a lot of the damage that we've created. So there is supposedly one study that they've done, which I got this from Timothy Scott's book called Invasive Plant Medicine, and they talked about how Japanese knotweed moved into an ecosystem with hard compacted soil, grew deep roots in there, opened up that soil, and then had actually transitioned out once it was finished with that. So often on stream beds, and just check, make sure it's a wholesome place, and often on roadsides, which I would never recommend harvesting off of a roadside, because they are bioaccumulating and uptaking the toxicity we grow them in. And this is an interesting thing because you have to cross compare from your own food. So along the cross comparison is, you might think, oh, I eat organic, Keebler elves make my food from heaven and it's pure. It's not true, friends. And so organic farming, certified organic farming, is 2 years to turn any old place like the corner of the New Jersey Turnpike and turn that into a certified organic farm in 2 years of remediation. With that, the USDA does not test for heavy metals. Isn't that what you would want them to be testing for? So lead, all these things, we don't know how much are in certified organic vegetables. So if we cross compare that to, well, I don't want to eat it on a roadside, just make sure that the thing you're eating isn't actually something growing on a roadside somewhere else. Because in India, I saw farms all over the place on roadsides. You would be shocked. So is turmeric coming from there? You know, are we eating turmeric from there? And then denying Japanese knotweed in our local resource. We just need to make sure that we don't export our idea that somewhere else is actually more pure than where we live. So, any other questions about knotweed? It also makes a very good knotweed shaker.
Can you use those in a bathhouse?
You could, yeah. You can beat people, like in the banya. They'll take oak leaves. You get a knotweed beating. It's a really cool tradition, actually, in Russia. They, in the saunas, when they sweat, they actually take bunches of oak leaves or birch. Birch has a really great smell, and they actually heat them up, and they kind of pat your whole body, and it really brings heat to your whole body. It's very detoxifying. It's a cool tradition. And let's see, what else we got here? So Nick was asking about the knotweed and cooking it. He also asks, would comfrey and horsetail be a good post-workout, post-injury tea mix? I say due to comfrey's known healing effects and horsetail's silica. So this is a great thing to be aware of if we do have injuries. Basically, what an injury needs to heal itself, so consider your knee, maybe there's a knee injury. That knee, the point in your knee is first inflamed, and that's really important because it keeps all the dead cells, the toxic cells, from going directly into your bloodstream. The next step after that is to give yourself what your body needs in order to heal itself, right? So usually we're thinking, if we go for surgery or something, we still need to give our bodies the ability to heal itself and repair the cellular damage. So if we go down to the level of cells, we look at that the body needs certain elements in order to heal: ligaments, tendons, bones. Those are all basically cells that are made out of certain things, just like rocks in the earth. So those things are made out of minerals, and those are the minerals that we eat. Those are the minerals that kale have. So magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, and big one is silica. And silica, of course, so let's cross compare microcosm and macrocosm. So in a farm situation, in biodynamics, they take high silica plants and they spray the silica plants in the air, and they actually reflect light onto the plant. So silica is actually the basis of glass in essence. It's kind of sand, right? So in the body, what it does is repair the hard places of the body. Horsetail herb, Equisetum arvensis, which can be wild foraged, but again grows in wet, swampy areas, which may or may not be very clean, is really high in silica, and therefore when we eat it, we take that silica into our bodies, and our bodies put it to the injured place. The same is true for comfrey. So comfrey also has those deep healing minerals. Oftentimes we can take comfrey and the leaves, you can use fresh or dried. You can pour just some hot water on that. You can let it soften up, and you can actually apply that right to an injury. You would need to do that, 2-3 times a day for 2 months to really see results. And that's the problem, is that people often don't commit to something like that. That's what you'd have to do if you didn't want surgery, so that's the option. Along with that, you'd need to internally take something. So comfrey has a little bit of issue in the herbal literature. There's an idea that it's toxic to the liver. It's interesting because in Russia they don't have that idea, so they're drinking comfrey tea. In America, in American herbalism, we're kind of skeptical about that. Of course, if some of you are familiar, Susan Weed totally has this suggestion, this idea that what comfrey is being grown in the United States is actually a cultivar. It's not actually wild Symphytum officinalis, which is a Russian plant, which is what they found to have liver toxicity. So if this is actually a variation, right, not a different species, but Symphytum officinalis var, right, you've probably seen that period, and then some strain, right? This is a lot of agricultural plants. There's 9,000 versions of kale like this. Kale is not a different species. Dino kale and all these different kales are just a little bit of a variation, and those lineages are built over humans evolving them, being caretakers for them, or manipulating them, which often happens. So with comfrey, use your best interest. Don't do it for a long time. That would be my suggestion. If I needed, I would drink comfrey 7-8 days, give it a 2-week break, 3-week break, then do it 7 or 8 days. Horsetail, only about a half teaspoon a day is great. Comfrey the same way. So then you're dealing with external application of comfrey, and you're dealing with comfrey and horsetail internally, and that's how to really restore the body from damage, physical damage. Those are some of the great ones, as well as diet, exercise, relaxing, not re-injuring, not just taking away the pain, which is what we do basically in allopathic treatment. So chances of re-injury are much higher if you just remove the pain signal, right? So if you break your ankle and then you dumb yourself down to not be able to feel that, that's when you're going to think, oh, well, I'm probably fine now, and walk on it and re-injure. And that happens very commonly because allopathically, or our modern society with the quick fixes, we just want to take away the pain. We don't actually want to give the body the time and the necessity to restore its capacity, which is why re-injury happens and why we don't heal. So those are really great healing plants. I actually have an article on my website that deals with just some herbal protocol points for injuries, because that's a really fun thing that I think about, and definitely recommend trying it. Anything else I didn't cover?
Mm-hmm.
Now I've got a live feedbacker. It's great.
Now, where can you get things like stuff like this? Any basic natural food store, or is this something that you can forage yourself?
These are both things that you can forage yourself if you know where to get them, as well as you can go to any health food store. They usually have both of these. Frontier Herbs is a big one who carries these. That's a lot of times when you go to a health food store, they're just buying from Frontier Herbs. So you also can buy from Frontier Herbs. Mountain Rose Herbs is another source. Generally, you want to get wild food into your body, so if you can find it. A lot of people who grow comfrey actually have no idea what to do with it, and so it just grows and grows and grows, and then they think, oh my god, it's so invasive, and they get these ideas, but it's like, use it. That's why it's abundant. If tomatoes grew like that, you'd be really happy, right? So then we need to understand how to work with comfrey and the details of that, which is why we can do herbal questions and answers. Great times. So those are some good sources to get herbs if you can't get them from a friend or wild. But also come on plant walks, and then I'll show you where those plants are growing and how to cultivate them. So Katya says, I grew up thinking that garlic and onions are extremely medicinal, yet Ayurvedic tradition suggests to avoid them. What are my thoughts on how and when is appropriate to use garlic and onions, or are they to be avoided at any cost? So this is a great idea, because when we take these methodologies such as Ayurveda or traditional Chinese medicine or even Western herbalism or rationalism or farming, horticulture, we put ourselves in a certain frame of allowance in essence, or take on a dietary idea, right? All of these things, or join a church, anything like this, it causes a certain limitation of perception. So in Ayurveda, right, the idea is that they're rajasic. They cause aggression, heat, lust, turmoil, waving of the mind, yet activity, productivity, intensity. So this is like super weightlifter energy or farmer energy or getting a lot of work done, right? The idea behind it in Ayurveda is if you want to sit in meditation or samadhi, this kind of waving will cause increased desire, right? Very generally, the idea is that it will increase desire. So if you want to reduce desire, they recommend reducing garlic and onions from the diet. Now, weirdly enough, ginger is also a root, and yet they don't recommend against ginger. So this is sort of like the purest, the purity yogic kind of Ayurvedic ideal. Now, this is for saints and monks who lived in caves their whole life and were trying to subtleize themselves and become enlightened. So the first question is that your purpose, right? I don't, that's not the necessity. And what we often mistake in Ayurveda is to think, or yoga is to think, this is the one way, that's the right way, and then everything else is not good. But really what it's saying is you know your own dharma, your own soul purpose, and then certain things facilitate that. And that's a much more practical or sane approach. What is my purpose and how do I engage that tool set? Not how do I make this tool set change my purpose, right? Then we can really see what relates and what resonates and what doesn't. So along with that, I kind of tend to avoid onions and garlic really because I also tend to avoid deodorant. And those things don't go so well together. So actually one of the ways I stop myself from being stinky is I don't eat a lot of garlic and onions. Now, what do I miss as a result of that? I miss that onions are incredibly detoxifying. Onions and garlic are incredibly detoxifying. They're antiviral, they're antibacterial. So they are a food-based medicinal in the sense that you can eat a lot of garlic and it helps to tonify your immune function. In Stephen Howard Buhner's book, Herbal Antibiotics, he didn't like that title, but it's there. He talks about garlic, how they've isolated several hundred antibiotic compounds from garlic and cross compares that to penicillin or amoxicillin are one antibiotic. So bacteria have a 20-minute generation cycle, and if you give them something within 20 minutes they've analyzed it and they started to develop resistance to that. If it's garlic and it's at the right dosage, it's very hard for a bacteria to just change its genome, because that's what they do. They change their genetic structure around your defense mechanism, which is your immune system, or is an herb, or is an antibiotic. Now the thing is, an antibiotic being one antibiotic chemical is really weak against bacteria because bacteria are masters. They've been here for the long time and they're going to be here for a very long time. Humans, So with garlic, for example, there's 100 and something antibiotic compounds. It's very hard for the bacteria to just develop resistance easily to it. But the problem is that cooked onions and garlic are incredibly less potent. So we would have to eat them raw. And eating lots of raw garlic is kind of hard because no one will go near you, which is really good if you don't want people sneezing and coughing all over you when you're in the elevator. So it's actually a very good sort of psychic defense against people sneezing and coughing all over you. But garlic and onions have that smell, which is actually chemicals. Those are sulfur chemicals. And it actually turns out that a lot of what they do is they secrete not from the armpits as much, they secrete actually from the chest, because they're actually secreted through the lung tissue. And that means literally you're creating an auric field of onion essence around you, which actually kills viruses around you. So if you're wafting an onion scent, essentially what you're doing is if somebody comes in your field and coughs on you, all that stuff is in your field, literally. And that's also true for your physical body, right? Your skin is actually inundated with chemistry that's actually going to stop a virus from overtaking that area in your body, and that's what develops illness, viral infections, I should say. So eating onions and garlic I've found actually is the time for them is the spring. And when we look at indigenous people's lifestyles, what they would do is they, all pre modern, right? Either homesteaders, Daniel Boone, Native Americans, indigenous people all over the world, especially in North America, let's just talk about. They had a long winter, and that winter would be you'd have all your food stored, you'd have your fat, proteins, carbohydrates. Fresh greens essentially would go away almost all winter. So the first fresh greens that come up in the spring are onions. And so you're just sitting in your teepee, you know, eating your last jerky, eating your last fat, and you're really starting to do what's called fasting, right? Which we would call starving. That would just be natural, that people would slow down their consumption later in the winter, and they'd get to that point in early spring, and really the first wild plants that come up are onions. So the onion grasses that we all are familiar with, as well as leeks. And that's why there's actually leek festivals all over the place. So people would eat tons of onions in the spring, and that's like a way of tonifying out the lethargy of the winter, right? All the fats and the carbs that we ate because we were homesteading and, chopping wood, doing really hard manual labor, walking long distances hunting in an aboriginal situation in the snow when you're trying to hunt new game is very difficult and takes a lot of calories. So the food, the carbohydrates, those fats, they have a tendency to cause more microtoxicity in the body. They're harder to process, right? So then when those greens came out, that's the time of detoxing. But this is about seasonal eating, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about, well, what did indigenous people do throughout the seasons, especially in New Jersey? And that's been my fuel for understanding foraging, understanding an indigenous diet, understanding what our ancestors did here, and understanding what's possible if, this whole modern society collapses. That would be my New Jersey pattern, essentially, to follow. So these greens would really help to detoxify us in the spring. So my kind of idea is to eat them in the spring, get really stinky like onions, sweat that all out, and start to kickstart my detoxification processes, lymph cleansing, liver cleansing, kidney cleansing, and then chill out on the onions and garlic for the rest of the year, because I know a lot of other antiviral, antibacterial herbs that are just as good and less stinky.
Now, do you feel that if you have a
Pitta, yeah.
if you're more of a pita, to I guess at that point you'd have to be very aware of your reactions to it, because being that onions and garlic would make you very hot and
Yeah.
agitated, it might have like a very adverse effect.
Yeah, and that's so if we step into the Ayurvedic framework, right? So there's kind of like a crossing between Ayurvedic framework and then sort of hunter gatherer Native American framework. And they obviously didn't have the same cultural ideas. And so if we step into the Ayurvedic idea with the constitutions, then we would understand, this heating effect with the onions can cause pitta disorders, right? Essentially, too much heat in the system could cause heat disorders. So then again, getting to the idea. So we'll just break this down a little bit. So there's vata, pitta, and kapha, which is the dosha. But then cosmically, according to Ayurveda and yoga, there is sattva, rajas, and tamas, and those fit together. They're sort of three kinds of trinities. So the individual is on this constitution between water, fire, and air. And then the whole cosmic universe is made out of these three principles, sattva, rajas, tamas. So this is, if you wanted to go deeper, sattva is Brahma, rajas is Vishnu, tamas is Shiva. And so those actually represent these energies. They're not like gods in heaven as much as they're cosmic forces that have been personified through intuition so that we can understand them and intuit them and see them and perceive them in more subtle ways. So sattva is generally peace, stillness, calmness, meditation, samadhi, bliss, all this kind of quieting energy. Rajas is that activity, in, so Vishnu is the protector of the universe, right? Then Shiva is the death, the tamas, the lethargy, the going deep within, the shadow, the darkness, all the letting go, the cosmic dissolution. So this is seen as kind of the cyclical energy of all of the cosmos. And, then the idea is the Big Bang has that cyclical situation, and the cosmic unfolding has that cyclical situation, and the human being has that cyclical situation, and every season has that cyclical situation, and every cell in your body has that cyclical experience. And so we use that as a framework of perception, and they're very helpful frameworks of perception. But it's good to challenge within yourself. If you have a lot of work to do, you don't need to get all sattvic necessarily if that's your life goal. So again, defining the life goal first, our purpose, is more important than should I eat onions, should I not eat onions. If you want a calm mind, if you want to do a meditation retreat, you might want to avoid them, see how it feels. On day 5, eat onions. See if you feel more stressed out or strenuous. Like, these things should be experimented on like science experiments. We have the tools of our perception to actually see if it's true for us. And that's a very important thing to challenge with any dogma. Is that what feels true to my actual experience? Not someone else's, not the guru, not the teacher, not the book. Yes, let me take that guidance, let me be soft and receptive to that, and let me see if it's also true for me. So then the idea with the last idea, which gets into sort of the dogmaticism of Ayurveda and yoga, is the idea that if you eat onions, you'll be lustful. Then if you lose your semen or your ejaculatory fluid, you kind of lose what's your potency, your shakti, your aura. And these are also ideas. So in higher practices of celibacy, things like that, then also they would avoid them for keeping in their shukra, which is your semen, and transmuting that into tejas, which is power, and then ojas, which is spiritual aura. And so the idea then is that by avoiding those foods, by drinking calming foods, by fasting, by meditation, you actually transmute that active energy which you would give outside into active energy which you would give towards awakening. So these are all concepts, these are philosophies, these are ideas. They may or may not resonate with you based on what your life purpose is. And that's the most important thing in understanding how these things relate to us. So we basically just have one more question, and that's from Christine Elizabeth in Pennsylvania. Hello, if you're out there. And she asks, any tips on herbal wines or great recipes you love for them? So I've not made any wines. I'm getting into making mead, because we have a great friend who's out in Pennsylvania that actually, I buy 60-pound pails of honey from raw honey, and so it's getting cheaper and it's getting easier to have a lot around. So I'm getting into mead making. For those of you who probably know, I make elderberry elixirs, so those are honey based and they're really delicious. So now I'm kind of bringing in the elderberry mead world. Along with that is, do you want to make it sterilized and use strains that come from sort of labs that isolate strains, or do you want a dirty mead and you want just all the crazy yeasts to go wild? So I'm really most interested in wild yeast, and so this also relates to wine.